What's going on, guys? It's Illuminostic in full-on radical revolutionary rant mode. Uh, I've really been thinking a lot about how we can get out of this mess and how we can even define the mess. Um, because it's necessary to define the mess before we can transcend the mess, which is problematic because the mess isn't the same for everyone. And it's not just that we relate to the mess in different ways. We inhabit different areas of the mess. We are impacted by different aspects of the mess. Um, Everyone's diving off. I wonder if I don't have audio. Do I have audio? Can somebody tell me? I'm never sure if this mic is working because the light doesn't. Um, anyways, planetary crisis, chaostrophe, as Terence McKenna called it, engulfing everything. Fear is driving most people's decisions, I think, and certainly is creating ontological goggles. People are seeing everything through a haze of fear. And one of the things that we know about fear from a psychological point of view is that it lowers the IQ. And so we already weren't necessarily the thinkiest bunch of monkeys. And so, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. And I think that one of the things that will really help us to navigate this, mitigate any further damage, and transcend the old world is to diagnose the collective pathological disorders that people have. And you know, I don't want to be too redundant, but one of the reasons I always bring up cognitive dissonance and cognitive biases of different types is that I still discover them in my own thinking, or at least I will notice incredible examples of it in the like social media landscape or wherever, in the cultural landscape, that people that I didn't notice. You know what I mean? And then I'm going, how am I still not putting things together? Um, and that's what we have to do fundamentally. That's why we are engaging in drinking ayahuasca. That's why people do yoga. That's really, the motivating factor behind every attempt at getting inner peace is to create some clarity of vision, so that we can figure out what it is that we are dealing with and who it is that we are that is doing the dealing with the thing. Right? And so I think, this is also one of it's a good opportunity to point out the sort of damage that a new age beliefs have kind of done to this practice of, and it's also motivated by capitalism. It's the influence of capitalism. Um, but the spirituality has become not about knowing yourself so that you can figure out how to relate to the world in the best way for yourself and for the collective. This is definitely, I would think, like one of the essential purposes of having a spiritual dimension to your existence. Um, it has become about finding ways to make the outside world conform to your expectations. And that's good to an extent. But oftentimes these gurus are selling methodologies and just complete nonsense. So what we have to do is reconnect with a real sense of purpose. Um, Communicating things to people that already think they know things is a big problem, though, and um, I'm, the jury's still out on exactly how we get around that. Uh, because when you confront these biases that I was mentioning earlier, what we get from people is fight or flight, and neither of those things are very conversational. You don't make a lot of progress with somebody who's in fight or flight mode. And so the first thing that we have to do, right? And I base what I'm imagining the collective needs to do on what I see happen in the individual who is undergoing a transformation in consciousness and a transformation in their being. It always starts with politics because I think this is the shallowest level of this type of revelation. This is the surface level stuff that everyone has to contend with. Everyone has some kind of relationship to it. Everyone feels affected by it, right? And it's one of those areas um, that people do the same kind of dumb things they do with religion, right? Like, let's say you figure out that being a Republican isn't good, so then you become a Democrat. And then you discover that that's not good, so then you become a socialist. But you don't like that very much, so you ism, 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 ism. It's the ism schism jumping game, right? Like you're just like people hop around from religions, like, oh, I was Christian and then became Muslim. None of this shit works. That's one of the things that we are, I think, kind of almost unanimously agree on. You know what I mean? All of these different systems that people are jumping from this system to that system to this system have all failed everyone that's ever used them, more or less, right? And at this point in human history, I think if we have the ability to tap into our objective powers of analysis, if we can do this without the doctrinal biases, right? Like, you're a Republican, so socialism and communism are pure evil with no redeeming qualities. This this kind of state of mind, like that is in the way. What we have to realize is that we have to be able to totally transcend even the perception of doctrines and systems, and just look for the utility that lies within all of them. And the the thing about all of this is not only do all of these systems that have been prepared for us not work, uh, they occult the truth, they hide the truth from people, a very simple, basic, fundamental truth that everyone really wants the same thing. And that, making determinations about what's in the best interest of the human race is not actually that difficult unless there are interests that are influencing the beliefs and perceptions of people. If you're able to remove the isms, the doctrinal dogmas, what you find is that there is there is self um, there is fundamental ethics, a basic sort of ethics and reasonable lines between charity and self-interest that almost dictate themselves. And I know there's an argument regarding nature or nurture, but it's not a very good argument. It's mostly the environment that produces individuals and their outlooks, right? And in our case, I'm not totally anti-capitalist. When people have the argument, show me a better system and show me how to make it work, uh, I don't really have a good answer for that. But I can see where capitalism needs to be moderated. And I can also see the influence of capitalism in places and areas where it needs to be moderated because it's become a beast with gnashing teeth. I mean, when you listen to the dialogue of people and the way that they make determinations, for example, I ran into a lady and her boyfriend the other day that seemed cool to me, and I wasn't, it's not a business pitch. Just this is just what I do. So I invited them to come and drink ayahuasca with us because they're our neighbors, And the way that the woman responded, like, where can I find out more? It's like, I'm like, look, like, are you in a commercial or something? Um, and when I said I live right there, you just come talk to me. Her attitude towards me kind of soured immediately, and it took me a second to understand that. And but when I was walking away, it kind of clicked that without like a website and like serious effort at making myself marketable and turning everything I do into a business, the fact that I have not been consumed by capitalist culture to that extent was like a warning, a red flag to this person. And I think that that is not any kind of system of evaluation that makes any kind of sense. This is how you choose your ayahuasca ceremonies. Um, you know, yeah, well, it's that and propaganda. It's not the purely capitalist system. It is it's a lack of balance, and it's a crisis of purpose. You're to just have this totally vapid, meaningless, consumption based society that has no tangible goals that are meaningful to anyone, other than the concentration of excessive wealth, which has become a complete joke in the United States of America, for example. The concentration of wealth is only occurring in a very small group of people, and the people on the outside have less and less and less. Um, and this brings us to a good point about the pathological disorders, the collective pathological disorders, which vary a bit from demographic to demographic, right? But one of the great accomplishments of the propaganda machine is that it has right wingers, poor right wingers, who these tax regulations will never ever apply to them, will never ever affect them. In fact, they would benefit tremendously from them. Will like defend to the death the rights of the infinitely wealthy, to hoard and oppress and exploit. And then on the other side of the token, you have the hypocrisy of the liberals and the left, who say that they are all about charity, and that the concentration of wealth isn't good, and turns out that they give like 30% less to charity than Republicans every year. And even though they have on average 6% higher income, um, and so again, this brings us back to psychedelics as an answer for all of this, because I've been kind of weaving all over the place, but faulty perception is the um, central issue here. I think if people are able to perceive things as they actually are, they are much more likely to respond to them in kind, right? I mean, kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? And so, what is all? Oh, these must be bots, Greek bots. You'd think that the bots would be programmed to at least look for people that are speaking the correct language, but so I thought about a couple of these crazy cognitive dissonance situations where different demographics could believe completely opposing things. Our ability to believe that which is obviously false is another um, a whole another bag of worms. But for example, I've noticed that, and I'm not making any judgments about any of these ideas or positions on issues or whatever it is that these wedge issues, I guess. Um, but liberals right now, their logic is that you cannot have an opinion on abortion if you don't have a uterus, but then you can be a woman without having a uterus. And so when you take positions like this, the people that are antagonists to your position notice this kind of stuff. It's like with religion. You have to be even better at it than politics. Jesus was supposed to be without sin. Anger is a sin. It's a sentence from the Bible, right? Jesus was often angry. Is another sentence from the Bible. You, you, it's like people have been conditioned to accept all of these totally opposite ideas and to become really deeply invested in their truth, even though they're patently, obviously false. We have developed a tendency to evaluate people and institutions, businesses on totally shallow, surface level, inadequate metrics of all kinds. Um, the other day, the woman that wasn't interested in drinking ayahuasca with the neighbors because he doesn't have a website, like not commercial. That's not how you choose an ayahuasquero. You're not looking for the commercial guy. That's gonna be the fake ceremony with 300 people there and a shaman telling you that his maestro has been on their traditional diet has been white rice and chicken for 5,000 years, even though there's only been white rice and chicken in South America for 200 years. Like that's what you get when you use the kind of commercialized uh, ontological protocol to navigate your world. You use a shallow in the you get what you give, right? So um, yeah, and one of the reasons that we have become so deeply conditioned to be predisposed to this kind of dumb fuckery is that our society has as one of its sort of essential mechanisms for maintaining its own existence, a very heavy reliance on fraudulent personalities of social veneer. Um, and most people are content to accept whatever personality they're given from someone in their surface level exchanges and actually believe that that represents the person. And so that actually allows the proliferation of all sorts of evils in society. Truth is self substantiating, so it'll replicate itself, right? It's going to continue creating whatever it actually is unless it's stopped. Right, so these veneers and the social masks are really um, conducive to spreading way more evil than having a social personality mitigates, right? And so, you know, developing our own authenticity and connecting to that and being willing to evaluate our own beliefs and our critical thinking skills, looking on intentionally for our own cognitive biases and realizing that we are not going to find any existing religion or any existing system that we're just going to be able to adopt letter to the letter that is going to save us from any of this. That's not how it's going to work. We have to actually um, innovate something new. We have to learn the secrets of alchemy, right? The rediscovery of magic for what it really is, an accelerated path to the evolution of consciousness, with the ultimate interest of pulling the whole human race ahead a step or two. Um, the understanding that the secret of alchemy was something truly important And it is the thing of probably the greatest importance. This thing of combining two things, and from a third thing, something higher emerges. This is, a lot of people also believe that mixed race people are the most beautiful. The most successful musical acts have been hybridized, different styles combined. This is evolution. This is progress. So the people that point their fingers and say socialism is a fail, and democracy is a fail, and communism is a fail, they are all correct. But not all of the people that believe that those things represent answers are completely stupid or completely wrong. They're all correct to an extent. And so, through the alchemical process of combining things in order to create a new thing, we can derive a system that will actually serve us in the future, which, in my opinion, is no system at all. Um, but if, I mean, we're backed into a corner. It's definitely true that it's extremely difficult to get outside of it all and to have any kind of independence, which is the first step to allowing the kind of consciousness that we need to proliferate. This is that trap is a sure way of suppressing the development of it. Um, People that are very much concerned with their own survival have not a lot of time for self-reflection. This is, if you think about the function of meditation as this pursuit of clarity and peace and calmness, and the major gateway to the ultimate enlightenment is just self-knowledge. In a super high-paced consumer culture, there is no space for sufficient peace and sufficient clarity for an individual to, um, for most individuals, to liberate themselves from this, samsara cycle, this trap of the matrix. Um, and since COVID has come, it's increasingly difficult. We have we're already. I was thinking about this, you guys, today. How many generations now of TV, like raised by television, now the internet? It's like three generations of children that have been ignored, um, parents who are sedated by all sorts of, SSRIs and benzodiazepines. I mean, I say this a lot, you guys, but the oceans are testing positive for benzodiazepines. That is a seriously drugged population. And if you guys don't know what benzodiazepines are, they basically make you completely dull, emotionless. Klonopin actually screws up your, like, I used to take them sometimes, and you'd find yourself like bumping into the walls walking down the hallway because your equilibrium is so screwed up. Um, Oceans testing positive. You know how big the fucking ocean is, right? I mean, that is incredible. Uh, and so, the commitment to a 60, 80-hour work week, and then the fact that there is no apparent purpose behind it all. There's not a unified community. People don't really understand that, as real patriotism should be about being bonded with your community and your fellow man, about being committed to moving the society forward, finding ways to mitigate suffering and starvation, finding ways to advance the sciences and to contribute to the arts. And I'm not saying there aren't any pockets of people that understand this stuff, but when we're talking about the mass of people, they just really, yeah, benzos are the polar opposite of psych. By the way, you guys, don't take Xanax to turn off LSD. That is just don't do that to your brain. Do not do that. I see people talking about that all the time. I mean, Aleister Crowley once said that most people get nowhere because they are expressing this fundamental law of the universe that opposites in equal measure cancel each other. And so most people take a step back for every step forward. Don't kill your brain with benzos, and definitely don't take them after psychedelics. That is just horrendously terrible. Um, so moving towards a more authentic society. Uh, and then the idea of an actionable plan. Um, One of the only things that we can hope to do, because affecting people that are not trying to hear you is increasingly difficult. It was a lot easier, I know, 20 years ago, because I've been having the same type of conversations with people for a very long time. And it's only in the last like 5 or 6 years that it's really, really become difficult to maintain any kind of dialogue with anyone that doesn't agree with you. Um, Although some fissures are getting better, some of the gaps in ideologies are closing in some areas, which is that is helpful. But what we have to do is concentrate ourselves in small communities of like-minded people first and foremost. And that is something that happens organically. There's places in Colorado and California and Hawaii and all North Carolina where entire cities and entire communities have adopted this sort of live and let live, embrace psychedelics, and good health, and they have an awareness of what's happening on a global scale that is intolerable, and they're willing to try to take some action to do something about it. And I think one of the things that we need to do now is kind of try to draw all of the people that are sort of straggling uh, into these places. Because the isolation and the sense of hopelessness that comes with it is one of the reasons that our progress is one of the biggest impediments to progress in terms of catalyzing the iconoclasm. Uh, yeah, I mean, and the COVID thing, that's really threw a wrench in our gears. For me, I had no problem just kind of like living outside of society. I haven't had a normal job in 20 years or something, and it was never difficult. It's only since COVID that it's become difficult, and I think that's part of the idea that they can kind of get they're increasing their control. Obviously, um, it's it's not helping anything. So what I was saying, I think, is that real patriotism should be about a genuine interest in the collective, and it shouldn't be patriotism. It shouldn't be nationalism. All of this stuff is just branding. It's just brainwashing. It is just a way to make you compliant, to get people's loyalty, and this is something I really want to understand about psychology because I don't have this tendency. I don't have the tendency to put an idol up on a pedestal and worship it. I don't have I'm not going to read something and believe it if it doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't understand people's commitment to doctrinal ideology. I saw recently, and this is something I've seen all throughout my entire life, but I was reminded of it recently that I think it was a flat Earth group where they were talking about, well, if you're a real flat earther, the true believers, and it just reminded me that people actually take a lot of pride in being committed to believing their religion or their political doctrine as it is written to the letter, that this is somehow um, a positive quality. And I don't understand how anyone could come to that sort of conclusion because progress comes from movement. It comes from adaptation. It comes from mixing things together and creating new things. So it's very difficult for me to understand how this problem even arises. Uh, and people that are still looking to our leadership, like President Biden. I mean, no Trumper. Every time I say anything bad about Biden or Harris to the Democrats, everyone says, you're a closet. It's gotten better. It's gotten better, man. During the election, holy shit, man, that was just the dumbest thing ever. But if you had any hope that that guy has any kind of mind of his own, um, the other day when he took a phone call, somebody said, "Let's go, Brandon." And he's like, "Yeah, I agree. Let's go, Brandon." And it was absolute proof that he will just say whatever he thinks he's supposed to without any commitment to, truth or. Yeah, well, that's why I'm so all about the gnosis and trying to demonstrate for people that it is possible. But as long as we keep running into these like mick religions and political doctrines that have been prepared for us and getting trapped in them, we're trapped. And it's it's not the easiest thing to get around because there's something in people that really compels them to become so heavily invested in these things, to the point where their perception of anything outside of those parameters is it's a non-thing basically. It's totally a fail. And the thing is, there is an element of sort of utility in myself. I mean, futility. Excuse me. I would like to think that there's some utility, but futility, in the sense that most of you guys that are going to watch this are already thinking like me to some extent. Um, I don't have to tell most of you that transcending religion is essential. That none of the religions are real. They're all fairy books, fairy tales. I don't have to tell you that none of the political systems are actually designed to support the sort of endeavors that humankind should be dedicated to. Um, you already know that. And I I don't know how exactly to give courage to the people that need it to recognize what's actually happening and to rise above it, because that's what they need. They need to let go of their fears. And once again, the only real way, I guess, for us to do that is to do it ourselves. um, we have to find ways of being financially independent, of demonstrating that you can be spiritual without being religious. Um, it's mind blowing to me how many people still can't separate these ideas. And like young people on TikTok that are making videos about science versus religion, and they're still using these terminologies, which I think we really need to be careful about that. The words that we use are what our world is made out of, as Terence McKenna was always astutely telling people. Um, it's absolutely true, and I think that we really all need to be aware of the necessity to create a new reality. As Terence McKenna also said a lot, it requires us to change our language, to develop new linguistic structures, even, and new symbols, and we have to be extremely careful not to find ourselves just crafting new dogma traps. What we have to learn to create are katmas, which are unlike dogmas, which are uh, very strict, absolute beliefs. Katmas are relative meta beliefs, so they're much more flexible. um, yeah, and it's true. I mean, the the liberals, I don't know when they started trusting government, because that wasn't really the case 20 years ago. They all thought that 9/11 was something fishy. They didn't like the Patriot Act, and now they're voting for one of the authors of it. People have been duped, and it is much easier to dupe people than it is to convince them that they have been duped. And I think that one of the reasons that if you're going to try to tell people the truth, you had better make them laugh, otherwise they will kill you, as Oscar Wilde once observed. It's true that the things that I put out there in social media that I think are the most important, the most powerful proofs, the most insightful, uh, uh, and the stuff that no one is saying, they are ignored. People just they have their limits, and it's really frustrating. So I appreciate all of you guys that are joining me on this live stream, because it can seem really daunting to think like, okay, let's start a movement that actually doesn't fall into the dogma traps, that is capable of affecting some kind of change, that is meaningful. And when you are able to articulate exactly the problems and offer solutions, and everyone unanimously ignores it, um, it's pretty scary. And I think basically the boundaries that people set are wherever they feel like acknowledging reality is going to conflict with their ability to maintain the life they've become comfortable with. Right? If they so much as admit that there's something true that is going to be disruptive, to their don't rock the boat, right? Isn't that the old expression? Don't rock the boat. Um, I've always wanted to tear the boat apart and build a new one. So, it's difficult for me to relate uh, to some of this stuff. I see a lot of people talking about how we were all asleep at one time, and that's not really true, man. I mean, I don't, there was no point when I had to wake up. But enough about me. It's no fun either, you guys, being an iconoclast. I actually saw a bunch of quotes today about, and for anyone that doesn't know what the word means, iconoclast is a person that is tearing down old belief structures, religion and political doctrines and dogmas. And I recently discovered that it is widely considered a negative term. It's derogatory, right, in our culture to call someone an iconoclast. Um, but trying to stay on tack here, I think one of the issues is that when you start telling people things that are provably true that violate these boundaries of just those things are not allowed to be true, right? So, for example, um, the United States was either attacked itself or was attacked by whoever, 9/11, right? Obviously something weird happened there. Building 7, no one has ever given a reasonable explanation for why that thing is, and obviously, like, you can see the charges going off as it collapses. If you ever seen, I've literally sat with uh military demo guys. I am a military demo guy, actually. uh Army National Guard. um it's a demolition. There's no way around it. So that's a decent example, though, where everyone has seen the evidence that something fishy is going on, but most of the people that have seen it, even though it's undeniable, they're just gonna go right ahead and ignore it, um, because it's just too much for them to come to terms with the fact that their government leaders could actually be that bad. And I think one of the reasons that we absolutely have to transcend our political and religious and all of these isms, schisms, and dogmas and doctrines, um, and develop this clarity is because we need them to see it, because if you have cancer and you diagnose for a splinter, you're going to die, right? And it's like their collective pathological denial is a cancer that could be terminal for all of us, and they're just kind of like refusing to believe uh, that it's an accurate diagnosis, or that they're even ill in the first place. Uh, and I think that if you really look at the behaviors of the United States government, and I'm not talking about conspiracy theory, they may have done this, they may have done that, they may be satanic people that eat babies or whatever. Um, if you can look at Hillary Clinton and think that her what was the word, frumpy ass is a Satanist, you don't understand what Satanists are. No self-respecting Satanist would wear those fucking shoes and sweaters and shit. Um, Also, the adrenochrome thing, man, we could talk about that. I should have talked about adrenochrome in the psychedelic myths video. I can't believe I didn't get into that. That's one of the dumbest conspiracy theories ever. It's right up there with the flat Earth. But what I was saying is, I think we have to be able to look at what we know for certain the governments have actually done. And then what you have to realize is that people that are willing to kill people, they don't care. Like it's not like who was president when they dropped the nuke, Truman, I think. Whoever they were, it's not like they think, okay, well, if we kill these non-Americans, it's not really murder or something. They're willing to kill anyone. They do not treasure or have respect or give value to lives of these citizens here and not those citizens over there. The entire idea of war as being like an acceptable activity is totally racist. It's like, if you're not allowed to use soldiers to kill your own people, but people in other countries are not human or something, so therefore you can kill them. And I really don't. I know that the leaders don't really think like that. It's all a facade, and we've seen evidence of it. We have proof of it. But and speaking of 9/11 and the evidence, right? Um, Well, the U.S. complained about this terrorist attack that killed 5,000 people, and that's terrible. Um, but what did Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like? How was that not the greatest terrorist act in the history of the planet? Because it was not an attack on a military installation, and it was a response to an attack on a military installation. Right? They attacked our military. So the thing to do that is I don't want to call it ethical, but within the rules of engagement, I guess is what it's called. You go and attack another military establishment. You don't just burn the fucking shadows of moms and dogs and babies into the sidewalk, 150,000 of them or whatever. And we know that our culture and our society and the leaders within it have degraded. They've gotten worse over the so many decades. You can tell that from the devolution of the society that they're supposedly governing, right? And there's this weird assumption that they've gotten better in terms of ethics, and no one has said anything like that. But as humanity has had to process the things that these people do and the things that they have tolerated and accepted as permissible, I think that they have had to project some kind of evolution onto their leaders in order to maintain this collective pathological denial that they're not as evil as they actually are. So tell your neighbors, tell a friend. I mean, it's raising our own awareness and freeing ourselves, you guys. That is really the only real work that we can do. Yeah, wasn't it Truman too that was on the phone ordering the unmarked Israeli jets to sink an American uh, airliner? Like like a president ordered an attack on our own military. If you told most conservatives that and played there's a recording of the phone call. It definitely happened. A lot of the soldiers talked about it on their deathbeds. Most people could not handle the idea that we know with certainty that a United States president ordered an attack on our own military. Like, can you imagine what that knowledge would do to like really patriotic, mindless sheep Americans? I mean, their heads would explode. It's like unfathomable. Yeah, the USS Liberty. I think that is it. By the way, one of the things we can do to get all of this stuff moving is support people that are fighting the good fight. So hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, and then there are links you can send me B&B, cryptocurrency. There's a Zelle, PayPal, and Cash App. And if you appreciate the fact that I'm out here trying to make the educational videos that I make, and then also these rants where I try to share my insights and experience, please do support us so that I am compelled to continue to do so. And it is really that will allow us to affect changes. And I'm not talking about specifically about supporting me, but supporting each other and going out of our way to support people that you feel are actually making some kind of impact or even trying to, you know. I realize that with COVID and everything, times are tough, but we really have to try to support each other and build up a meaningful community and a meaningful movement. I'm gonna add church and merch, merch to my church soon. The iconoclasm, Illuminati wear. Um, so keep your eyes out for that. It'll be another way to support the channel. Um, and I do feel like we're running out of time to affect certain changes, and there are still people whose interests and motivation are not they're not in the interest of anything but their own profit. It baffles me that there are still people like this. Like when I went to the rainforest recently, and you're walking down the road, and all of a sudden the rainforest is gone on one side of the road, like just as far as you can see, it's just gone. And if you've never been to the rainforest, you're walking around in there with all of these translucent butterflies that when they fly they like refract the sunshine, so they kind of look like a crystal going through the air, and blue ones the size of dinner plates, and monkeys jumping on your head, and all this just crazy stuff. And then you try to imagine driving a bulldozer through it, and it's just incomprehensible that there are still people that would do that. The Ecuadorian government just sold one third of its primary rainforest to the Chinese government. Um, we're not doing enough, and we're not doing it quickly enough. I mean, I have a son. I'm sure some of you out there have kids and younger relatives, younger friends, whatever. If they're going to have air to breathe, and uh, in anything at all, any kind of meaningful life, we have to act, and we have to act with concision, and we have to act swiftly. And the first thing, I know I'm repeating this a lot, but you have to liberate yourself. If you're still trapped in a job that you hate, you have to get out of it. You have to. You have to acquire different skills. It can take time, but you have to learn to be adaptable. But we need people to escape, and we need people who have their hearts and minds in the right place. Yeah, well, speaking of the over commercialization of everything, not trying to be an anti-capitalist here. Um, he was mentioning earlier, I was talking about how somebody seemed to be bothered by the fact that I didn't have a website when this. I can't remember what I was going to say about that. I mean, it shouldn't mean anything. I mean, it's such pressure to conform, to it's herd conformity the pressure is tremendous, even in alternative style communities or ecosystems or demographics. People still want to kind of insist that you are conforming to this sort of protocol and presentation, and it's totally toxic. It's totally stupid. It's totally counterproductive, but it's become the norm. And I think one of the problems with social media, it's done it to me, because part of my effort of liberating myself and making it more sustainable than it has been is just like a lunatic outlaw, like as I was living in California. Um, Social media is sort of an essential tool, and it's really really difficult for me to censor myself and to uh, operate with the kind of insincerity that is really necessary for anyone to have like a business relationship with uh, their life, because that's what social media essentially has done. It has turned into it's like pressure to monetize or temptation to monetize every aspect of your existence. Your entire life is an opportunity for monetization. I talk about many years ago, I had all of these outrageous experiences, and I didn't document any of it because I had not yet been conditioned to pull out my phone every time someone famous was around or anything strange or unusual happened. And I really think that I wouldn't have experienced all of that magic because the constant distraction of, for example, when I went to meet with these Native Americans that had come to tell us about the star tribes, and the Hawaiian medicine man called the wind and it actually blew. And I just can't imagine, like, I mean, not like you can record the wind blowing anyways, but that kind of is still a good example. That I think when these kind of really magical, meaningful things happen on this kind of subtle plane, constantly being engaging with our technology is really going to mitigate a lot of those experiences. And so, because it's these experiences that are sort of beyond the pale, that are outside of the materialist ontological parameters, uh, that actually inspire these changes that free us meaningfully from the conditioning and from the matrix. Like, we are in a trap that reinforces this sterile, lifeless, vapid, venal kind of cultural despondency that has led to the oceans testing positive for benzodiazepines. I mean, profit motive has people trafficking children. Um, I don't know if what good does it do to gain the world if you lose your soul? I think some hippie said that. Probably needs to get a job or something. I don't understand. I don't understand how people can do some of the things they do and still enjoy the money that they get from them. It's really, really just baffling. Yeah. So, um, rainforests will be gone within 10 years if we don't do something now. The oceans are almost completely dead, and they're on drugs somehow. Bad drugs, not good ones. Uh, People are willing to give up their freedom, to give up their rights. If you walk up behind them and say "boo," um, just scare them just a little bit, and they will piss their pants, and all of their freedoms will drain down their leg into the concrete, and they won't even mind to see them go. So, individual liberation is the path to collective liberation. This is really the only reasonable answer, you know, that what we have to have is anarchism. But it's not the kind of anarchism that people generally imagine when they hear the term anarchism. Anarchy does not actually mean that everyone's riding around on motorcycles, throwing bottles through windows, and robbing banks and smoking PCP or whatever. Um, Anarchism is about uh, basically cultivating uh, a state of mind where people take responsibility for themselves, and they are not going to impose their dogmas or ideologies on anyone else. Um, and I think that it's often considered an impractical uh, ideology, that there are just too many people, too much chaos, and too many influences that are corrupting and that are going to create these misguided miscreants that make the rule of law and order necessary. But I really don't think that that's true. And I think that we are evolving eventually to the point where we will become ungovernable. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is that there are two different types of people. There are those that need to be governed and will tolerate being governed. Uh, or, no, excuse me. There are those that don't need to be governed and those that will not tolerate being governed. And then people that still think they need to be governed. Uh, um, and will still tolerate it because they're under the mistaken impression that they actually need uh, people to manage their lives for them and protect them. I have never been fucked over. My cynicism, the influence of like normal society on me as I haven't really kept trying to integrate, but the little bit that I did, it is way worse than unregulated outlaw culture in like Northern California. It's more dangerous. The people are more dishonest, and because it's our culture is because our culture is, it takes for granted that people are totally artificial with each other. People are very natural at smiling insincerely, at being nice when they don't really mean it, and so it's a very treacherous culture. And in the Northern California outlaw communities where I used to live, there were no cops, but everything was on the table. You knew how people felt about things. You knew where you stood. And generally, there weren't a whole hell of a lot of problems. And when there were problems, it was generally because outsiders had come to the community looking to rob someone. But it generally was not the anarchist outlaws that inhabit Mendocino and Humboldt County and all of these places that actually were problematic. It was Asian gangs coming from Canada and tweakers from SoCal and those sorts of folks. Financial independence, proper use of psychedelics, good diet, creating Nietzsche's Ubermensch, and then making that the standard. And you don't even have to think about it in ideological terms of saving the human race. They are going to destroy all of it for all of us if we don't do these things that are in our best interest anyways. That we are basically obligated um, to commit to. Should be anyways. This should be what our entire society is based around. And the protocol in a sense is there in some areas of the culture. You know, there are demographics where people generally aspire to be the best that they can be. They want to be highly educated, they want to be rich, but there is something missing from the internal compass, and that something is a deeper purpose, uh, any kind of purpose, in much of the modern culture. And people are just spinning around like tops, trying to catch some money as it rains down in Jeff Bezos and Eric, or what's his name, Elon Musk's uh, garbage bags. If you play 2020 in reverse though, or 2021, whenever the billionaires went to space, if you play that year in reverse, billionaires descend from heaven and give the people lots of money. It's much more fulfilling to watch it backwards, um, than than it was to watch it happening in real time. So I don't know, guys. That's about an hour, I guess. Oh, I just want to mention at the end because I noticed a lot of the same people are here. Um, Oh, well, you know what? Let's just fill in the blanks from my psychedelics myth live stream the other day. Um, Trying to post what in my comments? It's not hard to post in my comments. Usually, if you just type and then hit the post button, I think you'll. Oh, right on. That's always good, man. I need to get healthier. Um, Okay, so the psychedelic myths video, the stuff that I missed. People are always talking about. Well, let's talk about adrenochrome first, because part of this live stream has generally been about how unbelievably dumb a lot of people are, and how we fail to notice these ridiculously blatantly obvious. Um, oh, maybe you can't post a link in the chat. You'll have to post it in the comments. Maybe you can't post a link in the chat. Sorry, I didn't know what you were meaning there. Um, so I haven't seen it for a while, but we were talking about psychedelic myths, and really, adrenochrome is not a drug. It doesn't really get you high. It is it's a analog. It comes from the breaking down of adrenaline. And so, if you were to actually take adrenochrome, um, the experience would be nausea, anxiety, extreme fear, maybe seizures, headaches, panic, uh, and it is basically a stress hormone. So, it would actually accelerate aging. So, and also this conspiracy about how they're gathering all these babies to get their glands so that they can get the adrenochrome. There is so little adrenochrome in what is tiny adrenal gland in a human being that in order to get enough adrenochrome for a single dose, you would need like a dump truck full of babies. It's just totally stupid. Also, it is extremely cheap and easy to synthesize, and it's readily available from Chinese chemical research companies. So if you're still believing the adrenochrome thing, you can go ahead and forget about it, because it was always completely stupid. It just came from a movie. What was that movie? Johnny Depp was in it. Beautiful fucking tits, man. That's from the adrenochrome scene. He had big hairy tits on his back and stuff. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention from the psychedelic myths video that I didn't bust these myths. People think that there are different types of LSD. There are not. There's no such thing as dirty LSD either. And let me explain. Um, no, it's not slang for blood transfusion from a young person. Adrenochrome is actually a compound. It's a chemical that is found in in humans. That much is actually true. Fear and loathing, yeah, thanks. Okay, so there are not different types of LSD. LSD is a tasteless, odorless chemical. It's a molecule. There are not different kinds. They're not. They will not have different effects. There's nothing. There's one molecule, and there's no such thing as dirty acid. This is so obviously a stupid myth that it really doesn't take much analysis to get through it. You are taking, when you take LSD, a tiny, 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 tiny microscopic amount on a little piece of paper. Even if you take like 200 micrograms, it's still microscopic. So say there's 0.01% impurities. There's literally no chemical in existence that's going to make your back hurt, make the trip weird. It's going to do anything at all in that range. So urban legend, it's if it's not LSD, it's another chemical, but there are not different kinds, and there's no such thing as dirty acid. Um, Okay, so anybody else have anything they feel? I mean, I've made my point. We have to resolve our cognitive biases and selective perception. We have to be willing to examine all of this stuff in ourselves. We need to be willing to confront people. We need to work to empower each other, support people like Illuminostic, and whoever else is really out there trying to spread the truth and encourage and inspire people to escape the matrix, transcend the old world ideologies, and create a new world. That is one of the things of the utmost importance, that we support people. And if you want to support me, there are several options in the chat and in the description. Um, and it's really not as daunting of a task as we are conditioned to believe, to transform the world, because the old systems that we're confronting and trying to dismantle, whether you're talking about the religious or political ideologies, doctrines, dogmas, whatever, are not impressive. They're not very good, and they don't work, and they're not true. They're so um, we have that going for us, that the old isms, there's they've obviously failed, and so what we have to watch out for mostly is just you know like the religion hopping thing, doing that politically. That's no answer. You cannot cure arsenic poison by drinking cyanide. So washing down your communism with socialism is not going to make uh, anything any better. Washing down your capitalism with socialism isn't going to make anything better. But if you can create something that is derivative, then you might actually have a solution. Why did you try to escape the West only to become a beggar from people in the West? I mean, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying there. I definitely don't consider myself a beggar. I trade cryptocurrency, and I have a YouTube channel where it's been demonetized because I tell people controversial things, and so I don't get any money, so I have to ask for it. I don't know. It's weird too. This is a person that watches this channel a lot. Like, why would you hang around and troll someone? You may want to reassess your. Um, yeah, I mean that's just kind of a weird thing to do, you know. And I don't know if escaping the West. What I'm talking about is escaping slavery and finding freedom and trying to create a new world. Clearly, I have not been able to detach myself from um, commerce or survival. That would require something on the order of death, I think. So, we can only do what we can. Um, some things are beyond our control. Yeah, it is a really weird thing to do. I don't. It's not the first time either. Um, some of the circumstances in our reality are dictated to us and not by us. And although we have a lot more power and potential to affect change than we generally give ourselves credit for, we also have to be realistic in order to be effective. And so we have to have the strength to change the things that we can. And I don't know about accepting the things that we can't. I think that there's a relationship there, but I don't know if acceptance. It seems too defeatist to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue to try to revise this old doctrine of acceptance, right? Because that's where we're at. We take the things that we have been given, and we take what we need and leave the rest. Um, what is with this guy in the chat calling me a beggar because I'm uh, we've been demonetized, so if you appreciate all of the hours that I spend putting into this content and the decades of research and experience that I had to accumulate to have anything to say, there are options to support us in the chat and in the description of the video. Since this guy keeps calling me a beggar, I thought I should just beg again. Um, I bet. Well, I'm not going to say that. Really, the only sad thing about trolls is that you kind of lose your train of thought, and I feel like I was actually kind of on a roll there for a second. Um, yeah, I mean, you're trading value for value. Oh yeah, okay. What I was saying is that some of the parameters in this world are dictated to us and not by us, and this is a really important thing to try to come to terms with, but also to not allow yourself to be defeated by it, because it can seem like an indomitable obstacle to try to fight against a monster. Um, like the society that has been created, and really the apathy beast is probably the scariest element of it. I had this horrific moment months and months ago where I realized that it wasn't that normies don't realize what's happening in the world, and they don't know what to do about it, so they're not going to do anything about it. They actually don't care. They do know, and they'll say that they care, because people feel obligated to maintain the status quo, right? To put on airs as if they are empathetic. But we all know that really, if you get most of these people privately and talk to them, they're only really interested in themselves, maybe their families, but it doesn't really extend much beyond that. It's just sort of polite to pretend like you actually care about all of the rest of this stuff. And that was kind of a rough moment, because I realized that it's going to make our job a lot more difficult. For myself, I don't really understand how anyone can have that kind of outlook, because I know that everything is inextricably intertwined, and there's no way to escape that. This is one of those parameters that is dictated to us and not by us. You are not an island. No man is an island. You will not be able to separate yourself from this. And so um, you really can't separate self-interest and collective well-being. Um, there there's no way to do it, and the people that you ignore and the people that you step on to maintain your pointlessly lavish lifestyle. I mean, I know people in the United States that, don't get me wrong, they're basically nice people, but they have probably $40 million in the bank, a 10-bedroom house with like 3 people living in it, 5 cars in the driveway, And you know, people in the family hesitate to ask for money. Um, I don't understand. I really don't understand. I want to accumulate wealth so I can make other people's lives easier. And the thing is, ancestral trauma, right? And the sort of self-absorption and too much focus on self-interest is catching up with people. So this idea that they can ignore it because it's not going to affect them is in this moment being proven false. And it's like, you know, the idea of keeping viruses at bay with vaccinations and the impact that that has on nature's ability to do its job, part of which is managing the genetics within a population and keeping certain species populations in check. Right? You can drive nature out with a pitchfork, but it'll always come roaring back again. Is from a Tom Waits song. That guy was brilliant, by the way. If you don't know the Tom Waits album Blood Money, do yourself a favor and go check it out because it's great. God's Way on Business and a couple of the other tracks are really really excellent. Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, people that think they can be apathetic and it's not affecting them because they have their job and they have their nice house and they have their car and maybe a nice blonde wife who takes phone calls. Um, they're not going to be able to maintain their separation. And in fact, I think that's happening. The walls of the castle are collapsing, and the proletariat and worse are coming over the walls, and they're getting ready to. They're finna make some upper middle class white person barbecue. You know, you cannot you it's all connected. It does affect you. I don't where does this delusion come from? You know, where do people get these weird belief systems? um, Nature tells us everything we need to know. It is through basic observation of natural systems that a lot of the greatest wisdom that has ever come to mankind, that's how we get it. Sorry. So we have 20% battery. I'm definitely open to the conversation if you guys keep it going in the chat. Uh, where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about how nature teaches us everything we need to know, and um, so does math. And this is an interesting connected thing. There was a movie that was made about a mathematician. I never saw the movie because I don't watch movies. Um, I think it was called A Beautiful Mind. It was about this mathematician who died in a plane crash. Um, and he actually, no, it wasn't Pi. That was crazy too. I can't remember it, but I do remember thinking it was a good one. Um, but this mathematician actually proved that if everyone mathematically, that if everyone took a little bit less, everyone would eventually have more, and it actually slows the process of accumulation a little bit. But in the end, it's better for everyone. Another really beautiful example of this kind of mentality in action is the business protocol of the Grateful Dead. Um, People don't, this isn't common knowledge, but there's a really good book by a businessman called Everything I Know About Business I Learned from the Grateful Dead. And that may seem weird until you find out that Apple and Microsoft and um, the original basis for Facebook, all of these reality defining um, you know business platforms modeled at least part of their business or they based their business model on that of the Grateful Dead to a certain extent. But just to summarize what it was about, basically, everyone in the entire organization had equal say. So it's not like our idea of democracy, which is a complete joke at this point. Actually, it always has been, for the reason that Socrates didn't like democracies. But the Grateful Dead took a very, very long time for them to accumulate the kind of wealth that Bruce Springsteen had, or whoever, from that era, or Led Zeppelin. I mean, the Dead probably has more money now, because they've lasted also, and this is something to really consider. Who was the only band from the 1960s that still fills football stadiums? The Dead are still out there, 80 years old, hobbling around on the stage, and still huge, absolutely huge. And it's because authenticity is a very good way to ensure sustained relevancy. Um, if it's done very artfully. But the point is, the Grateful Dead put the collective above their own interest, but they were very much capitalist. They were trying to make a lot of money. They liked having money. They liked having nice stuff. They ate their tour roster. One of the things that they insisted on was that they had, oh, yeah, that's true. The Stones are hobbling around too. So they're the only American band for sure. And in fact, they're the only American band that's still relevant at all. I think all of the other garbage, shallow classic rock crap has all been flushed down the toilet. Um, uh, so what was I saying? Okay, so putting the collective above the individual, right? To an extent, though, there were limits on this, right? The band made more money than everyone else, but the roadies made $250,000 a year, and by comparison, Aerosmith's roadies made $9 an hour. So their growth was a little bit slower, but it was more sustainable. And in the end, they were the most successful touring act in the history of the world. And they had Microsoft and Apple, emulating their business plan. And they they gave everyone an equal voice to the extent that at one board meeting, the janitor vetoed signing a contract with Warner Brothers. And so everyone had basically an equal voice, and everyone was well taken care of. And I mean, to the extent that it actually eventually killed Garcia because he couldn't stop touring, because there were so many people that were dependent upon um, him being on the road in order to, get his health together. What is that from? It sounds like Frank Zappa. Weird scenes inside the canyon, Laurel Canyon, covert ops, and the dark heart of the hippie dream. Is that a book title, or it sounds really familiar? No, Garcia didn't work for the CIA, and that is all just next level ridiculousness. The psychedelic bands were not, to say that because they all had families that had a military background, or many of them did, means that they had some kind of government connection is the kind of lunatic logic that creates the conspiracy theories that compel people to ignore all conspiracy theories, because so many of them are dumb, and we really have to watch out for that. It's I was just talking about this in my last live stream, that the idea that the psychedelic movement was created by the CIA because it wants to, I guess, render all of its propaganda ineffective, create a bunch of free thinking people that are ungovernable, an entire population of iconoclasts. This stuff all originates with Christian right wingers that are trying to smush smash like confirmation bias, I guess. I can't remember what bias this is we're dealing with right now, but they want to make everything fit into this is, Lucifer's world. And so, since it's ruled by Lucifer, then the governments are satanic, and therefore, you know, any movement that is subversive to us is also satanic and must be connected to Satan, and therefore it's connected to the government. And so this actually reminds me of something that's happening right now that is a great example of how people need to think a little bit more deeply. People on the right said that Trump was vilified because he was trying to do good things for the people. I find that logic totally sound. I'm not making a judgment about that statement. I'm just saying the idea that the media would try to take down a leader that was actually trying to overthrow the system, totally viable. Okay? But if you were to apply that same logic to the vilification of the left, then the right wingers should be suspicious of the vilification of the left, because that was, you know, what they're saying that the media was doing to Trump, right? And the truth, I think, is that if you want to find something that is truly powerful, that is going to move the human race forward, that is going to contribute to, you know, tolerance and freedom and individual expression and mostly individual sovereignty, right? And you see the media throwing it under the bus, or you're going to see the media throwing it under the bus, basically, is what I'm saying. So, you know, liberal ideology, uh, before it was hijacked by the propaganda machine, was actually totally good and helpful and beneficial to mankind. And uh, it blows my mind, but now Republicans are starting to actually demonstrate more uh, liberal ideology than the liberals are, in certain ways, because what is being taken advantage of in our society in order to make the propaganda so effective, right? We have two generations now of overworked, emotionally detached children of overworked, emotionally detached parents that have been cut off from nature. They've been cut off from um, their connection with, you know, the anything. Basically, they're like automatons, right? So we're like 2 or 3 generations deep in the progeny of these people. And so the inner child of these young liberals, and it's the same really for the right wing, but they're using this particular psychological disposition to their advantage more with liberals right now. Um, and they're taking advantage of their need for approval. So, you know, the people that are critical of all of the approval seeking liberals are not wrong. Um, the one of the biggest mistakes the right wing makes is that they just overdo everything. They you know the position that liberals are all like supporting criminals, that they want to destroy America for some random reason that no one can seem to really actually articulate, right? Just because Satan or whatever. Uh, you know, that's where they're wrong. But in terms of the propaganda machine taking advantage of the fact that people are seeking the approval that they never got from their parents, to the extent that you can basically create any narrative that you want, feed it to that demographic, uh, under the guise that it's the moral high ground, and people will adopt it and defend it with, you know, sticks and what is that line? Whips and chains and hand grenades. Um, I keep remembering this song, "A Little Ugly on the Side" by Frank Zappa. I wish I could remember um, something about how we have to go over to the other side of the world, to the land of the unbelievers. The unbelieving scum on the other side, because they don't go for what's in the book, and that makes them bad. So verily we must chompeth them up and stompeth them down, or maybe rent a nice French bomb to poof them out of existence, leaving our real estate right where it is, so we can build more temples in which to praise our God, because he can really get down to business. He wrote this book here, didn't he? And we can't be dumb, because if we're dumb, then God is dumb. and maybe a little ugly on the side. I miss Frank Zappa almost as much as I miss the Grateful Dead. But yeah, the whole CIA, this is, the right just needs to get a hold of itself with some of these conspiracy theories because uh, to suggest that the CIA wants to engineer an entire culture of free thinking, autonomous, ungovernable, um, it enhances your intelligence and your memory and emotional balance so that you basically giving people psychedelics makes their job impossible, right? So this idea that the whole psychedelic movement, I mean, can you imagine what the United States would be like? How dry and bland. What happened in the 1960s, the explosion of a new consciousness, is the only reason that I'm here saying these things to you now. It's the only, without that, there wouldn't be Terrence McKenna. Um, you know, the sexual revolution, it had a lot to do with civil rights issues and misogyny. Um, it's just really mindless to believe that particular conspiracy theory. Again, 9/11, obviously some fucking weird bullshit happened, and the most important thing to really take note of is that the same people that when I was in my 20s absolutely hated George Bush because of the Patriot Act just voted for a president that claimed to have written it. Um, it really is hard to believe, and it seems deliberate. I mean, if you look at what's going on around the world with all of the human rights, well, you can't call it human. Yeah, they're human rights, basic human rights. I mean, I was thinking that well, they're not really torturing people, but yes, they are. The COVID lockdowns resulted in mass suicides, basically, huge spikes. I guess not mass suicides, but huge spikes in suicide. Depression skyrocketed. And who benefits from all that, by the way? Big tech and big pharma. So, when I'm bashing conspiracy theories that represent, the beliefs of people that have not been able to think their way out of a wet paper bag, uh, Um, one of the first rules of conspiracy theory club is that in order for there to be a successful conspiracy, you must have a very small group of conspirators. Well, if you look at the top of the shit heap, where Bill Gates and Elon Musk and what is that robot kid, the reptile from Facebook, uh, Zuckerberg, Fuckerberg, Schmuckerberg, uh, um, that's a small group of people. That's small enough for the elite at this stage in the game are a small enough group of people to successfully pull off a conspiracy. And then the second question you have to answer to determine whether or not a conspiracy theory is a good one or not is the cui bono, who benefits. Um, and in this case, it's the very small group of people that are in a position to pull off a conspiracy. So COVID benefited the people that are in a position to pull off the conspiracy. Because when people become depressed, what happens? They start taking benzodiazepines and SSRIs and going to see therapists and getting pumped full of drugs, which makes money for big pharma. And then they also spent how much time just staring at social media? How big did TikTok get? You guys remember TikTok before COVID? Not really, right? And now it's like a part of your brain. It's a part of your um well, I mean, with almost certainty, he's some sort of blue blood. It is blue blood. It is true. In fact, we're going to talk about this in my patron only live stream tomorrow. So if you're interested in hearing the stuff that I won't say to the general public, um, then you can join our Patreon and join us for the secret streams. But I'm going to talk about the 13 families that actually run the world because, I have a lot of unpopular opinions. And one of them is that the Illuminati is not what people think it is. It's not fake. It's definitely real. There is no historian will tell you that the Illuminati never existed. That's not a thing. Um, but if you read Adam Weisshaupt papers, which I strongly recommend that you do, because if we're looking for a new way, a new world to be born from the smoldering wreckage of the last one, like some drunken phoenix uh, with trash bag for wings. Um, Adam Weishaupt's writings actually provide a lot of really solid. There's nothing in them that I would take issue with, which is really an extraordinary thing when you consider that uh, people believe that it's such an evil organization that's out to control everything. Another thing that I would point out is that people on the right, in particular, seem to be suspicious when there is like a media narrative or a popular narrative about something. This is propaganda. And to use the same logic that they used with Donald Trump, saying that the media is vilifying him because he's good. Why do you think the Illuminati have been vilified? Like, why don't you stop selectively applying your logic and actually use it, apply it to everything, and you might actually get some truth. You know, um, it's just absolutely incredible to me that people don't think it's just a little bit further. But anyways, read Adam Weishaupt's papers, and it just represents somebody trying to avoid what's happening now, uh, and the demonization of it was in the interest of stopping people from connecting with things that empower them. And so along those lines, there actually are 13 families. When people talk about the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, Illuminati is the wrong word to use because there's nothing illuminated about them. Um, but there are 13 families. Most of them have been in power since Rome. And we're going to talk about that and a little bit about specifically what Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati were up to, as opposed to the popular conspiracy theory narrative that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. But what I was saying is, I'm sure Zuckerberg is blue blood. I mean, you aren't really allowed in the club unless you're a descendant or somehow connected to the blue bloodlines. Um, it's another interesting delusion that people have in the modern age. I think they seem to think that elite people, everyone knows in the days of kings and queens that they were looking down on the peasants and considered them like disease covered, rodents, like less than human, at least less than their type of human. And then they actually think that people like Hillary Clinton like love them and want to take care of them. That their politicians and leaders and the elite don't actually like. I mean, I think that Hillary Clinton sees the average person the same way that you probably would see a homeless crackhead with like diarrhea on his pants trying to open the door for you at 7-Eleven. You know what I mean? Like, that's how the elite view humanity. And some of them just have this weird job of like going on television and pretending like that's not the case. Uh, um, so it's it's one of those things that I think it's just kind of beyond the perimeters of what people are capable of considering. Um, and when they even hear these things, there's a tendency to just cancel you and dial you out. Yeah, sure. We're farm animals to the elite, but I mean, I know members of the Grateful Dead personally, and people around their scene and stuff. And Jerry was not a CIA agent. He was not. There was nothing inauthentic about that guy. And it's one of the things about people that just do not understand what psychedelics are. You cannot fake that. There's a certain level of consciousness and um, really authenticity that you cannot fake it. Now there is to an extent some truth to the idea that the Grateful Dead was tolerated in part as a sort of experiment, and that the CIA did take advantage of the existence of the Grateful Dead, but they were not funding it. Um, and the way that they did that basically is that they realized that the Grateful Dead were absolutely hypnotizing, and that it would that people would follow them around and do nothing but go to their shows and be totally absorbed in this weird magic that the Grateful Dead had. And so it was a way, and this is actually from a released Freedom of Information Act document, where they said that the Grateful Dead was useful, and it's probably the only reason that they didn't assassinate Garcia. And Garcia used to talk about that, how they were always expecting to get off a plane and get mowed down by guys with machine guns, but that they were useful way to keep potential revolutionaries and what is the word for people that won't play along? Um, rabble rousers, we'll call them, from actually doing anything, because they would just get high and follow the Grateful Dead around. And they knew that it was the people that were the biggest threat that were going to get swallowed up by this thing. And, but I think, the other side of the coin is that if it wasn't for the Grateful Dead, the United States, at least, and the rest of the world would be a much worse place to live. The kind of experience of family and community that I experienced at those shows basically transformed me from a gangster kid with a gun in my waist to what I am today. I always had this inclination towards psychedelic and mystical and stuff, but I was definitely dangerous at the same time, and it just totally reoriented my entire existence. And there was something about the energy at those concerts that really changed people in a way that made them just more connected to the collective and more able to understand that in order to make any kind of decent society, the only time I'll ever quote Jesus, that thing about loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Um, if people don't take it that far, it's the world will never be habitable in the way that it needs to be. And uh, it was also interesting to me that the Grateful Dead did not sing about this stuff. There was no real message in the lyrics, but it was transmitted basically telepathically. Not basically, but totally telepathically. I mean, they sung about murder and gambling and all of, whatever, just stories and stuff. But somehow the music carried this energy that would cause dramatic changes in people's consciousness for the better. So, I mean, that's the other thing. If the CIA was behind the psychedelic music movement and all of that stuff, then we need to put the CIA in charge of the world, because if they created Timothy Leary and Terrence McKenna and the Grateful Dead and all of these other things that have made this planet tolerable, then they are an amazing organization, and we should give them all of our money and let them be president. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, but that's just the most broke down, dumbass conspiracy theory that I've ever heard in my entire life. And like I said, I know some of the people involved, and I know who they are, and it's not like Phil Lesh is one of the kindest, most sincere people that you will ever meet in your entire life. Bob Weir, however, I don't want to talk about too much because you might be right about him. No, it's not notable because they weren't part of MK Ultra. That's what I'm saying. You're getting this is all just like tabloid level interpretations of what actually happened. What happened is that the CIA was doing experiments where they just gave different people from different sectors of society LSD, and then they just recorded what happened to them. And so that is how it escaped the lab. Um, uh, One of the reasons that the people that were exposed to LSD in the late and early 60s rose to become so famous is because so few people had it, and it made their minds totally different than millions and millions and millions of other people around them. So it's again that ridiculous lunatic logic where you're like, okay, these people were part of an experiment and they got famous, therefore they're part of MK Ultra, and it's not real. Uh, the Freedom of Information Act, everything relating to MK Ultra has been released, and there's not a shred of evidence to support any of that stuff. Yeah, they were giving it to unsuspecting citizens. That is definitely true. But Robert Hunter was just a genius, and they gave him LSD, so he stood out. He was different from all the other geniuses. There's it's easy to make these leaps of logic, but it's not wise. It's not real. Um, and King Kesey, uh, either. I mean, these people were sincerely people that had gotten the message of psychedelics, and they understood that they were the antidote to the atom bomb, and that if people didn't very rapidly wake up from their slumbers, that the whole world was fucking doomed. And it's absolutely true.